What is up, everyone? Welcome to episode 43 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast, brought to you as always, of course, by RUDIS. Matt, how's it going in Ohio? I know you've been crazy busy. I heard you got some really high-level athletes in there to maybe sponsor. I heard you had a coaches clinic. Well, I saw it online. Coaches clinic. Man, so much stuff going on.
Yeah, we've been hopping the last 3 days. I mean, it was really cool Saturday. Ohio USA put on a free freestyle and Greco-Roman clinic. So we had
Nice.
350 to 400 kids come in from around the state of Ohio with a bunch of just amazing clinicians. We had
you guys had a kind of a laundry list of clinicians.
A laundry list. So we had, let's see, Bruce Burnett, Kerry Colat, Mike Zadek, Harry Lester, Jay Antonelli. Who else? I'm missing a couple here.
Who did you miss? Well, didn't you have Cael Steiner? Didn't he do a session?
Cael did a golden ticket clinic down in Butler, PA, outside of Pittsburgh, so he wasn't able to make it.
Got it. Well, okay. Well, great clinic. You've been super busy. Yeah. Jesse's over making new shoes in China, and you're going to sign some high-level athletes. RUDIS is kicking butt and taking names.
Yeah. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll make some pretty cool announcements about some new athletes joining the RUDIS team. So had a couple really neat guys in this week that are great fits for what we're doing and what we're trying to build with RUDIS, and they're just great fits for what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks we can make that announcement. But it was good week.
I did want to make sure we mentioned right at the beginning of the show, Sarah Hildebrandt gets the win at Beat the Streets Los Angeles. Really cool event. Hollywood versus Bollywood. Looked like fun. I get to watch her match. I know we're not discussing that at length, but really cool event. And I love seeing Beat the Streets doing great things. And it's cool that they did a girls exclusive event. It looked like it turned out really well.
Yeah, it was a really unique event. I think it was good that they actually split the event. I think in 3 weeks they're going to do Beat the Streets in New York again.
5 weeks, I think. It's May. I believe it's Monday, May 6th. I'm planning on going, Matt. I might. You know what, Matt? I don't want to break any news, but I might even be wrestling.
Are you serious?
Well, I don't know. We'll see.
Cool.
I'm gonna throw a teaser out there.
No, that'd be great. And I know the format is senior level guys versus NCAA champs. Yeah. I know that's what they would like to do, but I'm sure the great idea as far as getting the participants committed to that. That's always a difficult thing, you know, especially that close to the U.S. Open, and that
you're only a week and a half away from the U.S. Open and a week away from 2 weeks away from the trials. Obviously, if they qualify for Final X, they are a month out. But yeah, I don't know. That always does seem to be an issue, Matt. I don't know why they don't push it, either earlier or later or in the fall. It seems like there's a lot of other times of the year. But, but really, if you're a senior level athlete, your most important competitions are right in that time period, the Open, the trials, the Final X. And so making weight another time, competing another time, traveling another time, that's kind of a hassle. And it's not like, for what it's worth, it's an awesome event, but it's not like you win a world title at Beat the Streets.
Right. And it with everything that, they have to navigate through, with the U.S. Open coming up with the Final X. I don't know what your approach would be. I've heard some.
I love to compete, so I would have showed up, but.
Yeah.
As long as they didn't make me make what 163 was always really hard for me. So as long as I didn't have to make like anything close to scratch, I would have showed up.
Yeah, and I think that's sometimes where I think maybe the event organizers could possibly be their own worst enemies. Is that they're so bound by the format that it's got to be scratch weight. Well,
I don't think they are doing scratch weight. I don't quote me on that one, but I don't believe so.
Well, I know that I had discussions with several guys this weekend, and they're, discussions about catch weights, where they want to be, what they would agree to, the terms of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I know just talking to Kyle Snyder and some of the possible opponents.
Is Kyle going to wrestle in it?
I think he's taking it into consideration. Obviously, he doesn't have to compete at the U.S. Open.
So he's not going to the Open. He's probably skipping the trials too.
Yeah, skipping the trials,
So,
you just
like,
get ready
in a
for Final
circumstance
X.
like that, man, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to go get a high level match and make weight and do all that kind of stuff because he's not competing in any of the other events.
Yeah, I think, the possible opponents they were talking to him about is it's a little easier said than done that, "Hey, I'll just wrestle this guy and, let's go at it." The opponents that they were throwing out there for him, a little bit more to consider than just, your typical opponent. So, we'll see how those things to develop, but I think there's gonna be a lot of cool things to talk about and a lot of interesting matchups, at least to speculate about coming up.
So, come on, you probably can't tell us Kyle's possible opponents.
No, I think they threw out a couple different possibilities because Kyle's kind of at the gap weight, with where his weight class falls. He's not, a 97 pounder, but he's not a heavyweight. He's right in there in the mid 220s. So
Yeah.
who those opponents could possibly be, I'm sure you could,
Well,
probably
Gable and
figure,
Nickel
figure
are
out.
the obviouses.
Yeah,
I mean,
Gable,
Gable's going to
Nickel,
be competing at.
Kassar.
Yeah. Oh, Kassar. Interesting. Yeah, that's some
Yeah.
good stuff. Okay. I like that. I'm curious to see if Kassar's going to get that 6 year, if he's just going to move on, and if he's going to wrestle freestyle, if he's going to fight, what the deal is, really. So, hey, listen, today, our topic, and we spent the first few minutes BSing a little bit. Now, I've been looking forward to this one. I think it's really cool. We're going to do the top 10 coaches of the year. And I think this is fun because everyone always announces coach of the year. And I feel like I always can't stand that it's always like the same two people is what it feels like to me. And so, Matt, I don't know. One of the things I guess you and I kind of left the criteria open-ended. I would just like to talk about what my criteria and kind of what I was thinking. And then obviously you can let into what you were thinking because we didn't set a specified criteria.
Yeah, and I think that's what lends itself to interesting discussion without saying, "Oh, we've got to lock in and totally agree." It's up to our own interpretation about what we feel makes a great coach and what he's doing for their program. And I know for my list, it kind of runs the gamut
Yeah.
on the different criteria and how I factored that in and made decisions accordingly.
So one of the things I was looking at of the year. This is not my best coach. This is the best coach of the year. And one guy I thought of as a great example. He didn't make my list, and just because it's Chris Bono. It's his first year at Wisconsin. Obviously, in your first year, you're going to have a lot of hardships that you deal with, and he got Evan Wick on the podium again. He got Trey Hilger on the podium as a freshman. They had a solid dual meet season, but it's just like. It wasn't a top 10 coaches season. Now, could he make it next year? There's a definite possibility. But did he make it this year? And the answer is no. And it's just because he had some hardships. Being a first-year coach is always hard. I think kind of like I look at that lens like, how did they do this year? How did they coach this year? Because it's like if you think about a wrestling tournament, now there's some guys who are a lot better than others, and they're going to win every single time. But there's a lot of weight classes where you could wrestle the weight class multiple times, and it's going to shake up all kinds of different ways. And that's
No,
kind
and
of
I think that and I think there's other interesting discussion pieces. Are you talking about, how the placement at the NCAA tournament, or do you put context into the overall season, your dual meet performance,
well,
the strength of
yeah.
your team from 25 to heavyweight as
Well, what are
opposed
you
to
doing?
a couple. I think there was I didn't limit myself to just the NCAA tournament. I looked at the cross section of the entirety of the year, and case in point, I think Chris Bono did a great job at Wisconsin. Was it? I think they placed 21st at the NCAA tournament, had two
21st,
All-Americans.
yes, I believe.
Did a great job, but does it warrant the top 10? Probably not. Even though he did great. Was it? Far and away better than the previous coach at Wisconsin? Probably not, but I think that that remains to be seen because he's kind of putting his footprint thumbprint this year
Yep.
on an existing roster of athletes. So
Yeah.
he hasn't had the luxury of bringing in his own recruits. So
Yeah.
what he did with a similar team that Wisconsin had a year ago, less graduation, I think Bono and the Badgers did a great job. And I think there's a lot of interesting discussion pieces with Wisconsin moving ahead for sure.
So
But
I would say that I also took the full gamut, right? I definitely took the NCAA into consideration, and I think you'll see my number one pick. Getting guys on the top of the podium is gigantic. But I didn't discount the dual season also, and you and I have talked about this. I mean, if you go Nolf Nickel, if you take three guys, man, I give you three guys to take the NCAAs. You take Nolf Nickel and Spencer Lee. That team finishes third place,
Right.
and they're put and actually, if you take points away from Penn State, that they're coming close to winning with three people. So I don't feel that the best way to score an NCAA team thing is by the NCAA team tournament. So I am also taking everything into consideration. The other thing I would lean heavily towards, Matt, is I think some of these teams have an inherent advantage in recruiting because of who they are and their history, right? We can name them: Oklahoma State, Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa. Really, those would be your main four that have kind of an inherent advantage. And so I'm kind of leaning heavily towards how do you develop these guys?
Yeah, and
I put a lot of weight into that also.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I would actually take the opposite side of that discussion with, when you're talking about the top programs, you think there's an embarrassment of riches, right? That it's they have a built-in competitive advantage over a lot of these teams, but they also have a lot more pressure than a lot of these programs have. But
Matt, if you put a robot in charge of Oklahoma State that doesn't know damn about wrestling, they're still going to get a bunch of the top recruits. You know what I'm saying? It's freaking Oklahoma State. They're going to get the top recruits. It's not like some of these other programs who really got to grind it out. And
but I think that minimizes. I actually think that minimizes the effort it takes to coach high level guys. When you have a roster of highly competitive athletes, there's a lot of things to navigate through.
Oh, absolutely. That's why I'm saying I'm saying development, Matt. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we can probably start jumping into this, and we can probably weave in and out of the discussion pieces about why we made the decision we made.
Yeah.
So why don't you bust out your number one?
No, number one. I thought we were starting at number 10, working our way up.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, I think I would like to do that much more. Okay, number 10. Troy Steiner, Fresno State. And
what? Right out of the gates.
Did you pick him at 10?
We agree. I have him at number 10 as well.
Okay, so I'll tell you why I picked him. Number one, there's a whole bunch of things here. He did a great job promoting the program. They're having really good attendance in his second year. He got an All-American on the podium, which for a program that literally, Matt, they started from scratch 2 years ago. That is great. They had a solid dual meet season, and they qualified a decent amount of people for NCAA. And he's doing a pretty good job recruiting the Fresno Valley. So it looks like he could have a lot of future success. And then to throw on top of that, I'm giving Troy a lot of compliments right now. He has two highly competitive guys in the senior level, and Jason Chamberlain and Joe Cologne.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo your sentiment just across the board. Troy Steiner and Fresno State has done a phenomenal job, not only reintroducing the program on the D1 level, but the movement across the board. Like you said, it's not just where they placed at the NCAA tournament. They had their first All-American since bringing the program back, which is great. But all the check marks that you're looking for, they're competitive in the dual meets. They're competitive in the Big 12. They got a number of people to the NCAA tournament. They had a world medalist on the senior level. They had another finalist at Final X.
Yep.
They're putting people in the seats. I think last year they were top 5 in dual meet attendance. I don't have the dual meet.
And Matt, this is from zero. They didn't have a program. I mean, good God, do you realize how hard that is?
So going from 0 to 60, they put 5,000 plus people in dual meets multiple times over the course of the last 2 years. They put guys on the world team. They put guys on the podium. So across the board, I mean, they're recruiting at a pretty high level. So I mean, to get that up and running, because it's a little different. I mean, another guy we're probably going to talk about is at Iowa State, but the program was never discontinued. They just replaced the head coach. With Fresno State, the program was discontinued for what, almost 10 years,
It's
where
about,
it
yeah,
ceased
but
to
yeah,
exist.
about a decade. I mean, yeah, so
So,
feels
I
about right.
mean, to go literally, and it wasn't like the program was interrupted for a year or two. You're talking, a couple, you know, recruiting cycles. So the kids that
A
are
couple, like three.
yeah,
Damn.
and so the guys that Troy Steiner's recruiting now, they were literally in elementary school. They had no knowledge of what Fresno
Mm-hmm.
State was. They don't remember
Yeah.
Stephen Abbott and the great tradition that Fresno State already had. I mean, it was literally starting from scratch. And so to be able to do that, and people will say, "Oh, well, they were only 30th." Only 30th. I
Yeah.
mean, come on. That
So
means they're in the top half of all D1 teams 2 years after
they
coming
didn't
back.
exist. So I would
Yeah.
say, I mean, Matt, this is so you and I had the same sentiment on Troy, but this is one of those where this is the great job he did this year. Now, if he's going to remain on my list, at least I can say this for myself, he's going to have to keep showing progress. I mean, if he's stuck at 32nd no Americans next year, he's probably not going to make the list, even
Right.
though it's the same guy. But I think one of the things you said is coaching for me is way more volatile than wrestling. Wrestling is you're one guy, you got to focus on one thing, and that's getting your hand raised. Coaching, you have to balance all these personalities. You got to worry about getting a crowd in the stands. You got to worry about your ski. There's just a whole bunch of things to worry about. And so I think for me, the top 10 list is way more volatile. And Troy's a guy. He made our list this year. I think he did a great job, but I mean, he's going to have to keep showing progress, which is going to be tough out there to keep making the list.
No, without a doubt. And you know what? I think he wants that pressure. I mean, he wants those expectations. So it's going to be exciting to see, what Fresno continues to do. Obviously, the first 2 years, I think, you would give him, high marks across the board
Yeah.
on all levels for what he's done. Not just obviously on the wrestling mat. He's doing the most important thing, and that's putting a competitive product on the mat. But you don't have that high level of success as a team without doing everything else right.
Yes.
Recruiting, admissions, fundraising, RTCs, all these things that you got to juggle as a head coach. He's obviously got a good handle on that. And there's no doubt he's going to continue to climb up the national ranks.
Yeah. Okay. Let me add this. Number 9, Chris Ayres, Princeton. What you got?
I had him a little higher on my list,
Okay.
but
Okay.
he
So
is on the list. But
okay. Well, I'll just tell you my good things about him, and then you give me your number 9. My
okay.
my good things. They had 3 All-Americans. They were pretty good from a dual meet perspective, top to bottom. Not great, but good. And I just think, one of the things I think about, Matt, is I think about what is this program ceiling. And now, listen, I hope Chris Ayres is not thinking the same way as me, but I think it's almost impossible for them to be a top 10 every single year. Almost impossible with admission standards, with how much it costs to get into school, with how many kids actually want to go Ivy. I think it's really, really, really challenging. And so for him to get 3 All-Americans, I do believe all 3 of which are coming back. I think that is, I think that's huge for Princeton. I think, he's a guy that could maybe even go higher on my list next year if he keeps it up. So I just think, kind of like Troy Steiner, doing a great job under tough circumstances.
Yeah, without a doubt. So I'll jump into my number 9, and that would be UNC, Chapel Hill,
Ooh,
North
I left
Carolina
him off my list.
with Coleman Scott. I think what Coleman's done, and it wasn't necessarily this year's performance, and maybe you can hold my feet to the fire on this one.
Well, no,
It's just
he was close for me, Matt. Very close.
he was what I see is consistency and continuity. I think UNC programmally over the history of their program, they've had good performances. They've had good
Yeah,
teams periodically, but I think what Coleman's doing and what I like is there's consistency, and there's consistency in performance from year to year. I think last year he was, I would have to look it up, but I think he was somewhere in between 15 and 20 a year ago,
okay.
but he replicated that performance.
Hey,
And so,
Matt, someone was asking me, what happened to Kennedy Monday?
I'm not real sure.
Because
I
he
know
wrestled earlier this year, and then I didn't see him at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that. But, I think what Coleman's done, he's doing a really good job in recruiting. Obviously, it's a
Yep.
really attractive school. It's a high-level institution. It's in a great location. It's in a good conference. So seemingly on the surface, it checks the box on a number of levels. Well,
Yeah.
this should be consistently a high level program, but that's a lot easier said than done, especially being in the South,
Absolutely.
being at a predominantly basketball institution. So I think a lot of people sometimes they mistake that just because you're at a high level institution, you get a high level of support, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. Obviously, it's in a major conference and they offer the sport of wrestling, but I don't know that there's a high level of support from the administration to
Nice.
really push UNC up. But I think what you know Coleman's showing and proving what they can do with what they're giving, and to consistently have this team in the top 20 now. Just like what you were saying with Fresno, it's good to see what Coleman's done in the first couple of years of his tenure at UNC. Now, can he continue to move the program up, taking it from 15 to 20 to 10 to 15 and sequentially move up,
Yes.
similar to what Virginia Tech has done in the
Yep.
last decade, how they've incrementally climbed the national ranks, and they're kind of at this point, Virginia Tech is kind of firmly entrenched right around the top 10.
Yep.
They won a trophy a couple years ago, and I'm sure that Coleman's got the same vision for UNC as some of the other programs within the conference. But that's for those reasons. That's kind of why I put Coleman Scott
Nice.
and North Carolina at number 9.
Yeah, and he just missed. He just missed my list. I had him on my list of finalists. Another one, and I don't want to get us too far, but it's just to make mention. Again, we talk about this year. Like I said, Bono missed this year, but I think over the aggregate, there's definitely a chance he could be a top 10 coach. I think he would have been last year, but Pat Popolizio is another one.
Sure.
Didn't make my list this year, but I think if you look at a few of his past performances, he would have ranked very, very highly on probably both of our lists.
No, without a doubt. And again, did NC State have the year that they've had the 2 previous years? No, but they didn't fall off the radar. The difference
Yeah.
between, I think NC State was 17 this year. I mean, there's not that big of a difference between number 10 and number 17. You're
Yeah, I
looking
mean,
at the difference
if Nick
between
Renan, right? If Nick Renan's healthy,
Yeah,
maybe it's a
yeah,
different
you're looking
story.
at the difference between one performance or, a handful of matches at the NCAA tournament that can
Yes.
really, push you up the national ranks. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, because they
even
only ended up
this
with
year,
one All-American. They were kind of in a spot like I don't know if you remember the Missouri team that flopped and took like 24th, but this is my one complaint. I think wins at NCAA should count for more. Missouri had literally every single person on their roster in the round of 12, the round of 16, or the round of 24, meaning none of them All-American, and that's what NC State had one All-American this year. And you can have all those dudes winning matches, but if they're not getting the All-Americans, they're not scoring that many points.
right,
So,
right.
okay, so let's go. You go first on number 8. I already went on number 8.
Okay, so my number 8 is my number 8 on the ranking was also number 8 at the NCAA tournament. That would be the Minnesota Golden Gophers with Brandon Eggum.
Okay.
I think people forget, what he inherited. I mean, there was
Yeah, seriously.
some volatility going on with the program when Jay Robinson exited. They ended up
A
losing
lot of
what
volatility, man. A lot of volatility.
yeah, I'm trying to be politically correct a little
A
bit, but they
lot.
lost
It
they
was
lost
crazy.
some big time difference makers, and those what they I believe they lost 3 big time blue chip guys from their roster a
Yes,
couple years
that's.
ago,
I
and
mean,
that's not
yeah,
easily replaceable. Some people think, well, this is this big machine, this big factory. You just recruit these guys, but I mean, look at Penn State when they lost their 25 pounder
yeah.
2 years ago. That's easier said than done when
It
you're
takes
saying you
time
need to replace
because
that guy.
the money you would have spent on somebody else is gone already. So you
Right.
can't just go pick someone else back up. But yeah, I mean, when you lose like 3 or 4 guys like that, and that's where we talk about development. And I know a few coaches on my list ahead of this. I'm going to talk about that, their ability to fill in spots. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying about it. I mean, I'll say it, man. It was a disaster when J-Rob left. J-Rob had a great run, but the very, very end of his tenure, whether it was his fault or someone else's, was kind of a disaster.
Right. So all of a sudden, when he left, all of a sudden, Minnesota, they were right around 25th, right? From being a
Yes.
mainstay in the top 10 and the top 5 for so long.
Yep.
They lost a number of key people with that situation, and they dropped down to 25, and 2 years later they're back in the top 10. I mean, that just shows you
Yes.
not only that the leadership abilities of Brandon Eggum, how he was able to stabilize the program, get everybody rallied back around the program, get new coaches integrated into the system. I was really impressed with them throughout the year, but also the last month. I kind of thought
Oh yeah,
they got
they came on
I
strong at
yeah,
NCAAs and
I kind of thought they got a shot in the arm at Big Tens being it
yes,
was
at home.
in Minnesota. So I was like, home field advantage. The guys are feeling good. They're comfortable and they're in their home environment. They had a great performance. I didn't expect them to replicate that at the NCAA tournament, but for them to turn around 2 weeks after the Big Ten and get 8th place and put a handful of guys on the podium again, I think that's a really testament to the leadership skills of Brandon Eggum for him to stabilize the program, not just stabilize it, but put it back, in what they perceive is their rightful place in college wrestling which is firmly entrenched in the top 10. And I don't think you should discredit the past performances. I think you've got to take into consideration all the obstacles and all the hardships he had to navigate through. And that's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree. I got number 8. I got Doug Schwab. I think it was a program that we talked about all year, who had a really good dual meet team. And they end up not having a great NCAAs actually compared to what I thought they could be. And they had that injury. Who's the 97 pounder? I always blank on his name. Jacob Holstein, who's an All-American last year, so they lost him.
Yep.
But Lujan was rounded 12. Thompson was rounded 12. Albert was pretty close. Schwarm was, rounded 16. So they were really close. But I thought so. I think overall, despite their not so great NCAA performance, I thought they had a great year. And then for me, the feather in the cap was them getting their first national champion since 1999.
Tony Davis, right?
Yeah, with Drew Foster. So 2 All-Americans, 13th place finish. And from just the NCAA's perspective, I would say not that great, but I think they have a lot of these guys coming back also. So I think they're going to be good, not only this year but probably next year. And who knows? Maybe moving forward they can stick around that top 10.
Yeah. So my number 7 was Iowa State.
Ooh.
And Kevin Dresser. I think again, it's similar to what your comments were. It's not just the performance at the end of the year. I think getting in the top 20 in his second year and taking over the program, I think that was impressive. But also, it's across the board what he's been able to do in 2 years. Not, they're very competitive. In their
They almost beat Iowa in the dual match.
They almost beat Iowa. They're doing a great job in fundraising. They're doing great job in recruiting. They've galvanized the state of Iowa, and got a lot of backing. Not that they've got a lot of backing, but I think they pulled
do.
Back.
They're getting a lot more support than they had before.
They pulled back a lot of the traditional sport that I'm sure over the course of, the previous coach's tenure, they probably lost out on a lot of that. So, I don't think that's one of the things that people take into consideration is like the things that you have to make up, the thing that the program has lost and how they've backslid,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
for him to stabilize those things, not only just stabilize, to jump them in the top 20 after 2 years. And with everything that's been going on in the program, I think it's really impressive. And I think the upward trajectory is going to continue very, very quickly. I don't think they're going to be satisfied. I think they're probably thinking that a top 10 performance is well in their reach, and we're not rewarding that now. We're talking about the here and now. And I think Kevin Dresser is obviously, he continues to prove why he's one of the best coaches in the country. You're talking about being a high school coach, leading 2 high school programs to the near or the top of the high school ranks, what he did at Virginia Tech,
Yep.
and in very short order, the identity he's creating for Iowa State again, and the thumbprint he's already, his finger, his impression and his influence is all over Iowa State right now. So
Absolutely.
you got to
Okay,
commend
my
him.
number 7 was Teague Moore. Oh my God, did I say Teague Moore? I meant Scott Moore, one of the Moores. Scott Moore, Lock Haven, 2 All-Americans again. I believe it was a 17th place finish. It was a 18th place finish. I'm sorry, but and this goes back to what I said earlier about what is the cap of the program. Like, how high could you really go at Lock Haven? And I think the answer is not much higher. I mean,
No,
he's doing an outstanding job to compete. I mean, Penn State is literally, a hop, skip, and a jump down the road.
yeah, they're literally 15 miles apart.
15 miles apart. There's a lot of, there's just so much recruiting competition there. So for him to be able to get these guys into school, to get 2 All-Americans 2 years in a row, I mean, man, I honestly, Matt, I feel like their ceiling, like a consistent ceiling, is between 15 and 20. Like, I would have a very hard time. And again, I hope they're not thinking this way, but when I'm looking for an outsider's perspective, man, I have a very hard time seeing Lock Haven in the top 10 on a regular basis. Like, that is like, I just can't see it. So for Scott Moore, I feel like he's, getting so much out of what he has. And so, I've been super impressed with him. And I think, who knows, maybe he could be leaving for a bigger job. We don't know. We're kind of unsure of that. So we'll wait and see on that.
Yeah, so you and I agreed on this one. I had Lock Haven and Scott Moore at number 6 as well.
Oh, okay, cool.
And
you would know more about the limitations than I would, obviously.
Right. Being at Clarion, I was a head coach at Clarion, and during my tenure there, the year I was there, we were in the top 20 as well, and got 2 All-Americans. And I really feel the same way of what you were saying about Lock Haven. I think anytime a program at that level gets inside the top 20, it's basically the equivalent of their national championship, because
absolutely,
they can't really go beyond that. And I think people look at a lot of the PSAC schools, and by the PSAC schools, I'm talking about
Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference, right?
Yeah, you're talking about Edinburgh, Bloomsburg, Lock Haven, Clarion. And historically, they've all been great programs, but the landscape has changed. Number one, all these programs are severely underfunded. They probably have to raise at least 50% of their operational budget every year.
That's insane.
You're talking about,
that's insane.
An operating budget that's probably less than $100,000 just to fund the program. And then number two, when you're talking about the scholarship levels, a big responsibility is to raise scholarships. I think, Lock Haven is right around 5 scholarships. That could be variable based upon their fundraising for the year,
Yep.
but they're underfunded. They have about half the scholarships that they're working with. And that trickles down to, you're talking not only coaching salaries, but the amount of coaching positions that you're able to fund. And so, I mean, Scott Moore is constantly on the grind. That's what people don't recognize. He's constantly on the grind to make his program viable. He's constantly doing events. He does like 4 or 5 tournaments a year to fund the program. He's doing summer camps. He's recruiting, and so, there's a lot of hardships that people aren't aware. They just traditionally look, well, Lock Haven used to be a top 10 program. I was like, well, the landscape has changed in a lot of ways. And so what he's able to do with, he's doing a ton with a little. And I mean, it's really, really impressive. To your point, is it feasible for them to get in the top 10? That would probably take a national champ and probably 3 All-Americans, which they weren't far off from that. I think they had Thomas Haynes was in the round of 16 or maybe the round of 12 at heavyweight as well.
Yeah.
But to get another 2 All-Americans on the board with with the challenges that he has to overcome and deal with on a consistent basis. Just highly, highly impressive. Extremely impressed with Scott Moore.
Yes. Okay, number 6, I got Tom Brands. I thought good performance by him, not great, and a heavy part of that has to do with their ability to recruit, which we say is inherent at Iowa, now Penn State, Oklahoma State. It's kind of is easier to recruit. Why I marked him down is I think going into this year you were probably thinking second place for Iowa. I think that was where you're thinking. Other positives for him, for me, that they were able to get Spencer Lee back on top of the podium after having the struggles. I thought that was really good. And then just the amount of people. They had 6 All-Americans this year. So to get all of those guys in the All-American spots, I thought that was really good. I think 4th was kind of underperformance, but I did pick them to win the 2020 NCAA championship. So we are going to wait and see. And who knows, Tom Brands can move a little higher on my list next year for sure.
Okay, now for me, and I'm probably going to get upset a few people here, but I didn't have Iowa on my list. And I know there's a double-edged sword there, and I rewarded a couple of the traditionally strong programs. I have them actually at the top of my list, but like it or not, people can say you're the victim of your own expectations, but if you've established your program historically like Iowa has, and the general consensus throughout the years, you probably have the second best team.
Yeah.
For me to consider that, you actually have to at least match the expectations. For me, seeing them fall to 4th when they had the potential and the performance throughout the year to be the number 2 team, I think you kind of have to hit that standard. You can't fall below it. And again, that's the pressure associated with the top program.
Like, well, you want to hear my bad one, Matt, that people are going to get pissed at me about?
Yeah.
I left Tom Ryan off, and they took 2nd in the country.
Yeah, and I think
you want to hear why? I'll give you why. Singletary didn't develop. Ethan Smith didn't develop. Keyshawn Hayes underperformed. Heinzelman didn't develop. Tyshawn Campbell didn't develop. Okay, there's 5 guys right there. Miles Martin, I love him, but he underperformed at nationals. Micah never got that national title. And Colin Moore didn't come close to Bo Nichols. So it's just like, man, I look at that, and it's like, I guess it's kind of probably a blessing for him to think he took 2nd in the nation, and I think he had a pretty bad year. I think that's probably a blessing.
Yeah, and I actually have, the top 2 guys. I actually have Ohio State in there, for a number of reasons too, different than yours. But I think this is what creates interesting discussion. I think with Iowa, again, they had the opportunity and they had the expectation to get 2nd, and if you get 4th, you fall short of that. And like it or not, you're not rewarded for a historically top 4 program to be at the bottom level, the bottom rung of the expectations, which I thought the worst that they could they could have done worse. Don't get me wrong. They could.
I don't know. I don't think it would have been hard for them to drop out of the top 5.
Right.
Top four. Sorry.
For them to be 4th with the level of talent that they had throughout.
Now you're making me want to pull Tom back a little more.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden I'm sounding more like you than my traditional self. For me,
hey Matt, we got less than 10 minutes left, and we're still not even on our top 5. We got to get moving.
Okay, I will jump into my next one, and that was Northern Iowa.
That's number 5.
We don't have to. Yeah, that was number 5 for me, and we don't have to regurgitate a lot of the previous sound bites, but for all the reasons that you gave credit to Mark Schwab and you and I gave the same level. Doug, I'm sorry, that's his brother. Yeah, I put Northern Iowa there at number 5.
Okay, well, my number 5, I'm going to do the same thing you did. I'm going to go Brandon Eggum. I echo the sentiments you said about how they were a disaster, and they turned around so fast. I was just super impressed with what he did. I think he's graduating some seniors. I think he's going to have a very hard time getting very high on this list next year. That is my prediction. Okay, so my number 4 is Brian Smith, and I hope you don't call it a homer pick. I know they only took oh my gosh, they got bumped into 7th, didn't they? Or was it 6th? 6th or
I
7th.
think 6th, 62 and a half, 62 points, I think.
Yes, something like that. So for me, it was their ability to replace you. They've lost so many guys in the last 2 years, and their ability to replace them, or like they had a really good 125 pounder, couldn't make weight. They bring Dak Punky out. He wins a match at nationals right away. Grant Leith, who is ranked number 3 in the country, out for the year. They put a freshman in there. He takes 4th in the country. And so for them, their ability to just plug guys in. I think this has been Brian Smith's strength for a long time. Plug guys in there when they lose something is just amazing. I mean, it really is. Even a program like Penn State has struggled to do it at the level that Brian Smith has. So, huge ups to Brian Smith. And I think they are looking, next year, maybe they're going to have a challenge because Jaden Ironman's a little bit redshirting. Daniel Lewis is graduating. So next year might be a challenge for them, but they had 4 freshmen on their roster this year. I think they're going to be, maybe 2021, 2022, 2022, they're going to be looking really, really nice.
Yeah, and I don't want to disrespect or discredit what Brian Smith has done. I think he's hands down one of the top 5 coaches in all of college wrestling. But for me, it was almost he's a victim of his own expectations. I expected more because
Really?
he's done more with less for so long that I almost and this is wrong of me. This is probably wrong. That again, he lost a lot, but he plugged in, he filled the holes, and they performed at a high level. But I actually thought for them, it seems to me like Missouri has been stuck around that 4th to 8th place position for a long period of time. And I'm looking for the Missouri, and I think they can jump up above that. And when I saw them play 6th this year with the talent they replaced, it's almost, I don't feel like I should apologize, but in a way I'm like, yeah, this guy is so good and has been so good for so long that it didn't surprise me when he replaced this lineup this year and had another top 10 finish and almost another top 5 finish. So,
I mean, not to, and I know we gotta go fast, but not to defend Missouri too hard is, the one thing they struggle with and why it's hard to break into that top 1, 2, 3 is that they're not getting the blue chippers that a Penn State is, or an Iowa, or an Oklahoma State. And, they're getting some really good Brock Muller, really good guy, but who was not on the
so let me ask you this, and I know that a little bit. I think we need to ask ourselves this: at what point do we hang our hat on Missouri doing more with less, as opposed to they've been firmly established in the top 10 for so long? When are they going to start getting those top blue chip talents? Right?
They're getting really close. I mean, a Brock Muller was like a really, really good, not great. A Daniel Lewis, really, really good, not great. Jaden Ironman, these guys were really close to the top, just not the top. If that makes sense.
Right.
So they're getting really close to that point, I believe. Obviously, one of my kids, a Keegan O'Toole, now is the number 1 kid in the country. I think that might be one of the first number 1 kids in the country that Missouri has gotten Jaden was the number 1, obviously, but
so I guess
they don't get a lot.
For in this situation, it had less to do with Brian Smith and more to do with other guys and stepping up with their individual coaching performances this year. So
let's keep going.
For me, number 4, and I went back and forth on 3 and 4, but for my number 4 was Rutgers, having not only 1 but 2 national champions. And I know that people talk all the time. They think success is readily attainable, and that you should being in the state of New Jersey with the level of talent that they have, that naturally Rutgers should have ascended into the top 10 a lot quicker than they did. With I'm of the thought that it's a lot harder than
so much
think.
Harder. So when you never have one, Matt, to punch one through, because I experienced that at Missouri, it's a son of a gun.
I mean, you're solely responsible for carrying that burden, that weight, to kick down that door and do something that no one's ever done before. And to have not only 1 but 2 guys do that is just phenomenal by Scott Goodale and his coaching staff. Phenomenal performance by Rutgers. I think there's more challenges just because they're in the Big Ten and they're in the state of New Jersey. They have a few more challenges, on the surface than people actually recognize. So
Yes,
that was my
absolutely.
number 4 performance, and can't say enough good things about Scott Goodale and
Okay.
Rutgers.
Number 3, I'm going with Cael Sanderson, victim of his own success. I saw him get coach of the year. I didn't like that, Matt. I thought this was one of the very, very, very few years that Penn State actually underperformed. I get annoyed that, and I want to say, like, how could they not fill in one? You're the best damn coach of the country. What you've done with Jason Nolf and Bo Nickel and other guys is outstanding. How do you not have a 125 on the roster that can go in there and be just okay? Or a 184 when Shakur gets hurt. How do you have one guy that can go in there and just be okay? They stink. So that one really bugs me.
Come on.
What? What?
184 didn't have an ACL, so give him a
No,
break.
no, Matt. I said when they replace him in a dual meet. The guy that they threw in there was just terrible. Like how do you have one guy, that is like at least average in there?
Yeah, no, I mean,
so then,
because go ahead.
Let me keep going.
Yep.
So then I thought Nick Lee did not improve that much. I thought we were going to get more to Roman Bravo Young. So yeah, so I 3 and lots of years obviously he's kind of an obvious number 1. But this year I guess I was not quite as impressed. And we've also talked about in the last show how Vincenzo and Mark have not become that torchbearer for the bonus points like Anulf, Nickel, Rutherford, Ed Ruth, David Taylor have been.
Yeah. So my number 3 was Princeton with Chris Ayres.
Wow.
Having 3 All-Americans. Again, they just.
So what do you feel? I said what their ceiling was. What do you think their ceiling is?
I think you made reference to this. I think Princeton's going to be a cyclical program. I don't think with the constraints that they have, the rigors with admissions, with the cost of attendance at Princeton, all these real obstacles. Now don't get me wrong, they're at the best school in the entire country, and so
yeah.
And what Cornell and a lot of the Ivy League programs have shown is you can actually have your cake and eat it too, right? It used to be either you made a wrestling choice or an academic choice when you chose to wrestle in Division I. What Cornell and now Princeton is proving, and to a lesser extent Lehigh, is you can actually have your cake and eat it too. You can be the best at wrestling, and you can get a world-class education, and enter the professional ranks and have an unbelievable professional career. But that being said, what Chris Ayres has done, and what he did throughout the entirety of the year. Number 1, just taking on all comers, right?
Yes, that's awesome.
They wrestled everybody this year. They weren't scared of everybody. And so, I kind of like that Princeton put a mark on their chest this year. They're like, hey, we're going to be good. We believe we're good. And we're not scared to vocalize that. And they put it out there. They wrestled everybody. And they sustained that and had 3 guys on the podium. And it looks like with all 3 guys coming back, possibly they could jump even higher on the list from, being top 15 to possibly a top 10 performance.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, what they did, it has been great. And this is just not an overnight thing. And this has been a decade in the making, similar to what Rutgers has done. And so, I don't want to give them I hate when guys get the career achievement awards, right? And I don't want to minimize what Rutgers and Princeton has done, because these guys have both been there for a decade, but it takes that level of sustained effort to get a result that they've gotten. And so I don't want to say this is the culmination award. This has been a steady climb for Rutgers and for Princeton throughout the last 10 years. So I think that you do have to discuss that. You do have to give credit to their ability to sustain and stay focused over the long term. But it was, for
all right,
Princeton,
man, you're getting long-winded. We're way over time right now. We're already over time, and we're not even on our top 2 yet.
Well, you're going to call me a homer. I can jump into my number 1 and 2, and you're definitely going to call me a homer.
Well, it's obviously Sanderson, because you haven't mentioned him yet. I'm going to go number 2. I'm going to do this in less than 1 minute. I'm going to time myself. Kevin Dresser, number 2, for all the reasons you mentioned. He leaves David Carr on the bench, who he could have easily brought out to make them even better. He has multiple All-Americans, and he had 2 other guys that are on 12. And last year, Matt, they had one NCAA qualifier. One qualifier to 9 qualifiers and multiple Americans. So impressive. I was just really impressed with what he did and how fast he did it. Obviously, I knew he was a good coach. Obviously, I knew he was going to do better than the last coach, but how fast they got good was extremely, extremely impressive. So, you're number 2.
Yeah, can I go ahead and just go 2 and 1 since it's going to be my turn to go 1 after this?
Sure,
go. I went my number 2, I would say Ohio State, and number 1 would be Penn State. And I knew you were going to jump in on this, and it seems I'll wrap this up quick. It seems like a couple homer picks that are really easy to make, but to sustain the level of excellence that these two programs have attained over the last 8 to 10 years, I think they've both, Penn State and Ohio State. And I think your comments about where they didn't perform are warranted and are open for discussion. But I think Penn State and Ohio State are firmly entrenched as the top 2 teams in college wrestling, which you couldn't say a decade ago. And to be able to replicate the high level of success year in and year out, even when things don't go perfectly, and I know that Ohio State or Penn State was a clear-cut favorite. This was theirs to lose. Well, they still did it, and they did it at a very high level, and they had 3 national champs, and they're the victim of their own expectations at this point. People are saying they only had 3 national champs. Like, just think about that statement. Number one.
All right, I'm cutting you off. I'm cutting you off before you get Penn State.
Go ahead.
Okay, my number one, Scott Goodale. I thought, like you already said this. It takes so much effort to punch something through that's never been done before, and they did it not once but twice. In addition to that, good dual meet team. The Rack has got to be one of the best places to wrestle in the country. It has to be. So they've built that culture there. And they're doing a good job recruiting, and I think obviously them winning 2 national titles will only help that. If they can keep a lot of those Jersey kids home, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with for the next foreseeable future. All right, Matt, we are way over time. We talked for a while. I thought that was a lot of fun, that episode, and so let's call it a day.
A lot of this, yeah. I mean, I'm glad we were finally able to give credit where credit was due, because a lot of times we just kind of focus on the top individuals and the top teams. So I'm glad that we were finally able to give credit where credit was due.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, that's it for us. Episode 43. We went over time. Hope you enjoyed listening to it. We will be back later this week. I don't even know what we're talking about, Matt. You and I got to figure out what we're going to talk about. And we'll talk to you next time.
Sounds good, Ben. We'll see you.